Hi, I'm Trent, cybersecurity customer engineer and Azure Sentinel subject matter expert for Microsoft. I want to welcome everyone today and thank you so much for joining. I hope that our efforts here today will provide you with the proper guidance and incentive to envision a better security experience through modern techniques and what I believe personally is a better approach to that end using Azure Sentinel. And ultimately, my hope here is that I'll generate enough interest for Azure Sentinel that you'll take the next steps and take advantage of the trials and offers that we have available for this, which I'll talk about at the end. So here's what our discussion will be today. Here's my approach to a topic that can absolutely quickly go off the rails because there's literally so much that we could cover, and we only have a short time today to do this. All right, so I know you'll have a lot of content to consume and digest today. So I want to first get us all on the same page here by setting the base topic about why we truly need to deliver an efficient security experience for our organizations, not forgetting the watchers themselves or those better known as security operations teams. So I'm going to try to attempt to speak to multiple groups here today. I assume we have multiple attendees from multiple groups and multiple areas in the organizations. So I'll talk about what I've been able to glean from working with over 120 Microsoft Azure Sentinel customers in the last year. My intent will talk about those task areas that have become so irksome to so many customers, they either dislike performing them or stop doing them altogether, which in itself, as you can guess, creates a huge security gap and exposes those areas organizations are trying hard to defend. And then we'll settle on how Azure Sentinel is this modern cloud-born seam and SOAR tool that takes all of these time drag components into account. So even those tasks the other tools have made burdensome to the point of eliminating them completely, organizations can rest assured that security is continually managed, monitored, and protected from all angles, and done so in an efficient, effective, and repeatable manner. This is something very near and dear to my heart, and we'll talk about why here shortly. So let's take a minute to set the stage for our talk. Why do we need efficiency in security? Will efficiency compromise security or bolster it? And is there truly a solution that can deliver the promise of better security through improved efficiency without any compromise? So we need to develop a modern response to security threats based on this idea of efficiency. As a security analyst or security team, when you are actively hunting or investigating threats in your environments, you are on the clock, right? So things must happen quickly. You must get to the point of remediation as soon as possible because one intrusion could lead to the next. One compromised account could lead to another. And like this crazy pandemic we've been through, or seems like we're still going through, even more so at the moment, exposure can spread uncontrollably unless it's contained. You've heard the phrase super spreader event a lot recently in the news. Cybersecurity is essentially the same thing. If you don't control an identified threat quickly, it can become a super spreader event in a matter of minutes. Based on recent surveys and reports, it's been determined that the average company, get this, needs 162 hours to detect, triage, and contain a breach. That's a single instance, a single event. So let's break this number down so we can get a better understanding of the situation and our biggest threat, which I think is our biggest threat to security. The average organization takes, based on that 162 hours, 120 hours to detect that potential threat. 5 hours to triage, right, which is a simple task, but it takes literally about 5 hours to triage on the norm. 6 hours to investigate. So our numbers are getting a little bit better, but that's still pretty high. And then 31 hours to contain. Obviously that number will change based on the size and scope of the environment, depending on how large or how small it is, but 31 hours by a standard is huge. And that's where our 162 hours come into. To me, working with Azure Sentinel all the time, working and knowing the other products that exist out there that are kind of competitive to Azure Sentinel, I've seen both sides of this. 162 hours is a crazy number. Literally, that's our biggest issue right now for security, is things taking too long so people don't do them. So most of you hopefully have heard of this 1-10-60 rule for cybersecurity. If not, so not too long ago, this 1-10-60 rule was proposed as a goal. So labeled as a rule, but it's literally a goal because we essentially could not attain it when this was being developed. So not originally a hard and fast rule, but the goal of a rule that we should be able to attain sometime in the future when the tools and technologies have improved enough to get us there. So the idea is that the most cyber prepared organizations should aim to detect an intrusion in under a minute, perform a full investigation in under 10 minutes, and eradicate the adversary from the environment in under an hour in order to effectively combat sophisticated cyber threats. Hence, 1-10-60, right? Isn't that much better? An hour and 11 minutes? And I'll prove to you today, and hopefully in your interest for Azure Sentinel, we can prove it to you even further. Even an hour and 11 minutes based on what Azure Sentinel can do from an efficiency standpoint for security is a lot of time. We can do that generally in a lot less time than that. So for me, if I take a step back and review operations from an analyst perspective, these are the things that I believe that must be done each and every day to fulfill and enhance security operations for an organization. These are part of a standard SOC workflow, part of the normal daily operations. These are the things that add time to our responsibilities and our tasks, from triage to identifying false positives, which is incidentally another way to evolve the SOC, Security Operations Center, and to build bigger efficiency, but that's ultimately for another discussion. We don't have time for that here. Understand there's another number of value components built into Azure Sentinel to help streamline operations, even those manual irksome pieces I talked about for SOC efficiency. My approach to discussion topics like today's are always based on working with our customers. I'm not making this stuff up. I deal with so many customers that this stuff just comes. I write this stuff down and we work on it. I glean a lot of knowledge working with a large number of customers, and based on, admittedly, an OCD of mine, I want to solve their complaints, but particularly when it comes to the topic of efficiency. You can ask my wife. It literally pains me when things aren't done from an efficient standpoint and I must fix them. Whether it's my profession, it's my job, it's my personal life, this literally just, it nags at me, eats at me all the time. Efficiency is my thing. So this list that we have here on this slide are some of the complaints I've heard and captured from working with our customers. This list was developed based on their knowledge of working with their own old, tired legacy SIEMs and security tools that they've had in place for years. Most generally, these tools have been historically on-premises software and services. As we move to the cloud, of course, Azure helps customers realize additional efficiency, but specifically for our discussion here, as part of this, we want to focus on this list, these pain points, and how we can improve even the most mundane and most manual processes, right? So preparedness and hunting, if you've worked with any security tool or any type of SIEM, you understand that this preparedness exercise that is ultimately critical, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a short while, ultimately still critical, is still absolutely a manual process. But we do some things within Azure Sentinel to help even build efficiency around even manual processes, which you'll see. Continually tuning and evolving the SOC is huge and important to continue to build intelligence into our processes and how we manage certain threats, how we manage consistent and repeatable threats within the environment, how we deal with white lists and black lists and false positives and things like that. We have to continually tune this, and that takes a lot of effort. Adding investigative context is huge. You know, working with these types of tools, they're going to generate alerts when something happens. When that thing happens that we told it to go look for, it's going to generate alert, but if it's just an alert, we literally have nothing to go on. Thinking from the perspective of a TV detective or what have you, unless I have the facts and evidence, I'm not going to be able to do my job. So additional context for these is absolutely critical. And a lot of times, a lot of teams, security teams, are spending most of the time doing the research trying to figure out exactly what this thing is and how to remediate, right? And then ultimately, how do we continue to build intelligence from trusted sources? How do we know when there's a 0 day? How do we know that I have the most current threat intelligence in my tool? I mean, that's a task that takes time and takes away from efficiency. So this list that I've talked about, among a slew of others, other bullet points, is why we reimagined the SIEM and SOAR tool to introduce this relatively new cloud native solution called Microsoft Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel makes it easy to collect security data across your entire hybrid organization, from devices, users, apps, servers, any other cloud. Marie, I appreciate your presentation. She talked about multi-cloud and all this stuff. You may not realize it. From an Azure Sentinel perspective, you can connect AWS, you can connect Google Cloud, and the customers that I deal with that are multi-cloud customers, they use Azure Sentinel to make their other clouds more secure, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. We created this open platform where you can literally connect anything from anywhere. Since it's built on Azure, it offers limitless cloud scale and speed, scaling automatically to address your needs. Traditional SIEMs have also proven to be expensive to own and operate, often requiring you to commit upfront and incur high cost for infrastructure maintenance and data ingestion. So you get 10 new switches in tomorrow. Based on the tool that you might possibly be using now, you have to get the vendor on the phone and say, hey, I have 10 new switches. They're all going to produce log files. I need more storage. I need to store this data. First thing out of their mouth is, well, how much ingestion is that going to be? We're going to have to charge you for that, right? And then we're going to have to build out new resources for you to be able to store that information. Or if you're managing all this stuff on premises completely, then your operations team is going to have to do that. And it takes time, it takes a lot of time. From an Azure Sentinel perspective, we don't have to do that because we're built in Azure, we're built in log analytics workspaces. You send your data, we'll literally take all the data you give us in any time that you want to send it, right? So Azure Sentinel is a true software as a service solution for SIEM and SOAR with automatic scalability, no server installation, maintenance, or complex configuration. It lets your SecOps team focus on the most important tasks, which is absolutely defending against threats, exposed or potential threats to your organization. Azure Sentinel is available in the Azure portal, and because of that, becomes a central place or single pane of glass, which you've probably heard that term bannered about for the last 10 years. Single pane of glass to give organizations near real-time view of security events and to provide tools to investigate and to respond incidents, all the way from triage to the investigation or remediation. As an Azure service, you can easily augment security operations with other cloud services in Azure portal like machine learning, logic apps, and Azure Monitor. So Azure Sentinel already provides some automated functionality. The most prominent and most glaring are the examples that I want to highlight as part of our discussion, or the remaining piece of our discussion today, but there's absolutely plenty more than what we'll even talk about. In the time we have today, let's focus on these primary areas of Azure Sentinel that provide the most immediate value for efficiency without compromise. You'll see as we talk through these primary areas that Azure Sentinel works similarly to tools you may already be familiar with. However, each area has gotten deliberate and intentional focus for improvement over existing legacy tools. We've been very mindful to do it this way. To start, there are two key and critical pieces that make a SIEM valuable. If you've used this tool, you know this. The first is having the ability to connect data literally from anywhere, any source, and any format. Because understandably, if an organization is not able to ingest even a single log that contains security events, there's at least one remaining gap in security. It may exist somewhere, right, in the deepest, darkest, most forgotten corner of the environment and have a non-standard format, but without being able to glean the information from it into our security tool, we are exposed. Azure Sentinel makes it easy to connect data. A few clicks here and there, in most cases, will get the logs connected. The connection process even includes an auto validation to ensure that the security team member making the connection has the proper access. This ensures less debugging of data connections, which saves time. Click, 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 connect, right? The data connectors are supportable and sustainable because they are built based directly on the originating services guidance. This eliminates guesswork, which saves even more time. The data is stored in log analytics workspaces. If you're not familiar, a log analytics workspace within Azure can ingest and retain literally as much data as you can possibly give it. Again, you don't have to call Microsoft and request more space, wait for your operations team to build it out for you, or wait for an estimate to get your new contract price before it's configured. If you're using or have used other SIEM solutions, you know absolutely what I'm talking about in respect to that. The second most critical piece of any SIEM is data analysis. And in respect to Azure Sentinel, it's automatic data analysis. Azure Sentinel provides auto analysis of data looking for security events. Rules that you create and maintain analyze data on a schedule, and once the defined threshold is reached, it generates an incident automatically. The incident is used to then provide and develop context for a full investigation. People don't think about this often, but the query language that you use for these tools is absolutely important from an efficiency standpoint. The query language is another important key factor for providing efficiency for security teams. KQL, our query language for Azure Sentinel, has been developed for performance and efficiency and powers the logic behind Azure Sentinel's analytics rules, the hunting rules, and the workbooks. Works across the board. When an analyst, again, this analyst who's on the clock when security events are exposed is looking for security events and potential threats, they need an efficient security language or query language, right? They need the ability to produce results quickly. I've worked with customers that have been amazed at the difference in the time it takes for their existing tools query language to produce results compared to my efforts with KQL with Azure Sentinel. In a couple cases, using the same data, Azure Sentinel returned results in 10 seconds or less, while the results from the legacy tools literally took hours. Again, those that are familiar with these types of tools, you know exactly what this looks like and exactly how critical it is to operations to be able to return results quickly and expose those potential threats in the environment. Workbooks. Azure Sentinel provides dynamic reporting tools in the form of integrated workbooks. These workbooks help analysts visualize data so it can be consumed in a much more meaningful way, but also allows the data to be manipulated dynamically. So they're not static. Adjust the workbook focus, whether it's by user account, host name, IP address, data source, or what have you, and the workbook data is automatically adjusted, building the efficiency that we're looking for, helping get to that 1-10-60 rule, but in a more visual way, a more visual, more modern way, right? Organizations can develop their own workbooks to supply the team with common dashboards that contain critical data for SOC monitoring so that you have the tool you need right now. You can build these yourself using KQL. Incidents are what are generated by the automatic data analysis from our analytics rules. The incidents contain events, alerts, context, and this information that's critical for ensuring quick and complete investigations. Investigations are powered by the entities and additional context that is supplied from the analytics rules and the incidents context. The data supplied is used to automatically stitch together the story and timeline of how an event actually transpired in the environment. So the analysts can get a virtual firsthand look, again, using that TV detective as my example, firsthand look at the crime scene, the actors, and all the evidence that has been accumulated in relation to that crime. This ensures that an investigation can proceed uninhibited and ultimately without unnecessary delay, right? So you can get going without all the research is automated and done for you. Hunting is one of the more painful areas for any security team. Hunting is still a manual process. It's still a preparedness exercise. There's no way we can automate this to oblivion so we never have to do this again, but there's some things that we can do to make it more efficient. Hunting, this preparedness exercise is intended to answer 4 questions every time that you do this exercise. Does it, whether it's a threat or potentially new threat or a reported threat, does it exist in our environment? If it does, where does it exist? And then why does it exist? Was it a bad user habit? Did they click on something? And then of course, ultimately the last question that we need to ask is how do we react to this every time? If this happens, if this exists in our environment or potentially might exist in our environment, we need to be prepared. how do we handle this? This is, again, a manual operation. At Microsoft, we put effort behind supply and efficiency even in this area. Because of that list that I showed you earlier, this is one of those big things, right? Making many of those mundane tasks of preparedness more automated so security teams spend less time in this area. It's still necessary, it's just no longer drudgery. It simply becomes a normal, metered part of daily operations. This is one of those areas I talked about, like I said, that organizations have given up because it seems too time hungry and inaccurately deemed unnecessary because it takes too much effort. Without this operation, organizations won't be prepared for the next zero-day threat. So you need to continue to include this in your operations. Over time, when newly discovered threats are exposed to the environment, Azure Sentinel hunting queries can be evolved into analytics rules so that they stop being a manual operation and are now part of the automated configuration. So over time, through hunting, we make Azure Sentinel more intelligent and more efficient through intelligence. Another component of hunting, very great from efficiency standpoint, live stream. Live stream is a huge factor for efficiency and is absolutely unique to Azure Sentinel. This allows an analyst to kick off a query to run continuously so that it is constantly monitoring for whatever threat has been identified in that KQL query. When or if it identifies that defined threat as being active in the environment, the analyst will be notified. This allows that analyst to go about addressing their other responsibilities, whether it's investigations or building workbooks, while Azure Sentinel literally does the work for them. Pretty cool. Automation in Azure Sentinel is supplied through playbooks. So playbooks can be run in 3 different locations in Azure Sentinel. In the investigation graph, directly in incidents, and also enabled as automation by attaching playbooks to those automated rules, those analytics rules. So analytics rule will run, find that something that we told it to go look for, that security event that we want to identify and expose. You told it to look for based on the configured schedule and threshold and generates that incident. But now, because we've applied or attached a playbook, it does something else for us. It does something else that we told it to do. Maybe something as simple as sending the security team an email alert to say, hey, an incident was generated. Or maybe based on that KQL logic, it creates a service desk ticket, assigns it to a specific analyst, and locks out a suspicious or potentially compromised account. All those things that you, in the past, you've had to go into your tool, figure out what that compromised account was and go perform the operation, whether it was yourself locking out that user account or maybe going to your operations team and waiting for them to do it. You can automate that entire process. Playbooks are built on logic apps, which means the types of automation that can be developed are only limited by the imagination. Automation really, generally from an efficiency standpoint, really speaks for itself. Having the ability to automate common or repetitive tasks for more efficiency, for a more efficient operation is key. But there's additional context here that rarely receives its due as well. Automation can be applied to investigations so that even more suspects and evidence and facts and artifacts are available, making the investigative process even more expeditious and also more efficient. So from a planning perspective, how can we at Microsoft help you get there or take advantage of this? What resources are available to learn more? Are there trials available? All those types of things should be hopefully top of your mind right now. So really, I want to tell you how we can help you. First, we can deliver a 1-hour demo with Q&A time for your team, to your manager, to management, or anyone in your organization that needs to be convinced about the value of Azure Sentinel or convinced, hey, we need to test this out in our environment. Ultimately, in relation to this, contact your Microsoft rep, whoever that happens to be. Tell them you'd like to learn more about Azure Sentinel and see it in action, and they'll get this scheduled for you. They'll find the appropriate person to do this demo, and I would probably guess, I would bet that it would probably be me. I do a lot of demos for Azure Sentinel. In the meantime, we have an Azure Sentinel trial period if you want to test this yourself. If you don't have an Azure account, you can get one easy enough. Once you get an Azure account, and if you're already an Azure user, just search for Azure Sentinel in the Azure portal. Setup is easy and can take less than 5 minutes, literally. After that, start connecting your data and enabling analytics rules. The trial period is for 31 days. Connect all the data you like, in that period of time, whether it's hybrid, whether it's on-premise, whether it's other clouds, whether it's your Azure services. You'll get a great estimate of your data needs for both ingestion and retention for budgeting, and ultimately planning in comparison for what you might be potentially utilizing now. And then after that 31 days, hey, it's already stood up. You can just keep on going. My guess is you're going to find, if you're utilizing those on-premises tools, those legacy tools, you're going to find that Azure Sentinel wins out every time in cost, right? And also take note, this list, these services that you see here on this slide, these are all free ingestion, always. Everything from Office 365, which includes Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, to our Defender products, to Azure Activity, these are always free. You go into Azure Sentinel, you enable these data connectors, it's literally free. It's free ingestion, free analysis of that data, so pretty cool. And then next, as the interest continues to build, this is actually a pretty exciting component that we've just announced recently. We have an offer going on now until May 1st, 2021, where you can either migrate Azure Sentinel from one of those old legacy scenes we talked about, or start fresh and get 25,000 in Azure credits. That's huge. We really want our customers to be able to take advantage of this product. For many customers that are either in the process of migrating workloads to Azure or still working on initiating this project, this is a huge opportunity. I talk with customers all the time where they have accumulated both bad habits and bad processes on premises, and they are looking toward the cloud as their chance to start fresh and start secure and kind of start doing things better. Azure Sentinel is absolutely a piece of that. Of course, there's some fine details around this specific offer. So your best bet is to contact your Microsoft rep, whoever that happens to be. And if you're not sure, please feel free to contact me, and I will attempt to hunt down the right people. Here's some additional resources I wanted to leave you with, some short links. I understand you'll get copies of this slide deck eventually, potentially here shortly. Please take advantage of these resources. There's our GitHub repository, which is our content community. There's our peer and community area, our blogs, forums, and things like this, where you can ask questions, get answers, monitor things, the discussions that are going on there to see how successful folks are actually, how they're performing with Azure Sentinel right now, that coming from some of those other tools. My own blog, I write about Sentinel all the time. This is literally the only product that I work with. There's some other community components there too. A lot of activity on LinkedIn. There's an Azure Sentinel area, Azure Sentinel group, Twitter, that takes you to the Azure Sentinel hashtag. There's a lot of activity that goes on there as well. And of course, if you want to connect with me and ask me more questions, or I can help you locate who your Microsoft rep is, or help you get started with Azure Sentinel, please don't hesitate to reach out. Easiest way to do that is on Twitter. But